Hello, everyone. My name is Spencer Walsh. You are listening to Hell Island, and we have a good show for you today. So glad to be broadcasting once again from the center of said Hell Island in London town. On the show today, some positive negotiations for our friends up north. Northern Ireland seems to have a new deal in place with the UK government, and probably one of the most whiny, unhelpful, destructive political forces in Europe. The DUP seems to want to come back to politics. Also, more interesting comments on Israel-Gaza by David Cameron I do want to get into. And a really kind of shameful decision by the Labour Party. Unfortunately, this week, though, we do not have our Labour man himself, Myron Michaelides, on the show to break it down. Hopefully, he'll be able to join us back next week. So, given that just me, we'll keep it short. But yeah, unfortunately, Myron a bit busy to join us today, though we do very much miss him and hope he's able to come back next week. All right. So with that being said, some pretty major stuff going on in, I guess, Stormont / London at the moment, with a pretty major change with the UK government's deal with the DUP, saying the changes it makes are acceptable to both the EU and Dublin itself. So obviously Sinn Féin is a force at the moment within, both sides of the border. And as we can see, they are, I think they were the largest party, but are part of a coalition, or the coalition of the Fine Féil and Fine Gael. I'm probably saying those wrong. In Ireland are currently in governments, but Sinn Féin definitely a very, very powerful force there. And also north of the border, they won the election in 2022, but I think it was kind of the same situation that has played out. But ever really since the DUP, ever since the Northern Irish Protocol was put in place, the DUP has been kind of just not really functioning, and by extension, Northern Ireland has not really been functioning. But it's been a pretty rough situation just generally. So obviously we have, the Brexit situation, that was a pretty, we can just call it that, the Brexit situation. And obviously the border between Ireland, which is in the EU, and Northern Ireland, which is obviously part of the UK, that caused a little bit of a fissure because there is obviously a very, very contentious border there between Northern Ireland and Ireland, and how will goods flow across that border? How will they be regulated? It's a big thing, and that's especially something that the DUP has been just tearing itself apart over, and by extension tearing apart the government of Northern Ireland, which I have to feel for the people who just want to get on with their lives and have just been unable to because of this kind of revanchist unionism, I guess that you could say, that's been coming out of the DUP, trying to make it back to the era of the 70s, 80s, and 90s with some of this stuff. So you look at this here. It's important to it's important to really think of the people obviously in Northern Ireland, because they have had no real functioning government for the last 23 months, or no functioning devolved government, which is a big thing. They're talking about there's a big dispute between the Northern Ireland, whether to have a hard border, whether to have a border in a sea. The full deal is going to be published tomorrow, so that's going to be something we have to break down with Myron, which is probably for the best, having his knowledge on this next week. But the deal has been agreed, but the practicalities of kicking devolution back into gear still have to play out. So the question is, what happens next? No parties are back at Stormont yet, but the government is expected to publish the deal in full on Wednesday and pass the legislation in Parliament on Thursday. This could lead to a recall of the Assembly by Friday, or even Saturday. So it is definitely good to see people getting back into business here. The first order of business for members when they enter the assembly chamber will be to elect a new speaker. This must happen before anything else. The election of speaker requires a cross-community support. So a majority of unionists and nationalists here must vote in favor. In 2020, Sinn Féin's Alex Maskey took on the role. So it's not the most, again, significant role. It's going to be the first minister there. That would be the most significant role in Northern Irish politics. But Alex Maskey took on the role very well since 2020. Obviously was interrupted by the fact that there has been no functioning government in Stormont for the last 23 months. But anyway, it is traditionally rotated between unionists and nationalists, so it's probable the parties will agree to support a unionist in the post this time. And it really has been, remarkable to see Sinn Féin, which had been for a long time one of the more militant, definitely the political arm of the IRA, been incredibly militant, been incredibly inflexible, I would say, over the time. They have really kept their strong base of unionism, but have really conceded a lot and talked about issues that are really facing all Irish people up and down throughout the entire island on both sides of the border, and have really seen a lot of political success for it. Once the speaker is elected, the parties entitled to jointly lead the executive body that makes decisions and policy in Northern Ireland will make their nominations. So this is the 1-2 point. For the first time, Sinn Féin will nominate a first minister because it won the most seats in the assembly election last year. So very likely it's going to be Michelle O'Neill, leader of Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland, we would assume. So the DUP, though, is the largest unionist party. They will nominate a deputy first minister for the first time. So they're going to have to, take the back seat, because deputy, they will view it as taking the back seat, even though they're supposed to have kind of equal co-sharing powers in terms of decision making. When Sir Geoffrey Donaldson of the DUP became leader, he said he would lead the party from Stormont and stood for election in May 2022. He won a seat, but with Stormont down, he remained at his Westminster seat, and Emma Little Penginelli was co-opted into his Lagan Valley Assembly seat. So he is repping Lagan Valley was supposed to be repping Lagan Valley for Assembly, but essentially, due to this boycott by the DUP, he is currently just been staying in his seat in Westminster, which I believe is also Lagan Valley. So there you go. The party has not said who would take the post in a reformed executive. So the DUP previously held the first minister post from 2007 to 2017 and from 2020 to 2022. Although the titles are different, both offices hold equal weight, and one minister cannot act without the other. So, yeah, it's not like, the moment Michelle O'Neill gets in there, she's going to start, calling a referendum or, cutting Northern Ireland off, even though they do have now a nationalist majority. So the way it works, for those of you who don't know, going beyond that, is there are these 9 Stormont departments, and they are shared around all the parties based on how many MLAs they have, using something called the D'Hondt mechanism. So, just complicated math stuff there. But policing and justice powers will not devolve until 2010, but the DUP did not want a Sinn Féin minister being able to hold the post. It was, again, just like the speaker has agreed that any justice minister required a cross-community vote. Alliance has held the portfolio, which is kind of mid-party, not really strongly one way or the other in terms of nationalism and unionism, has held the portfolio every year for the devolution bar of 2016 through the 2017 mandate, when independent unionist Claire Sudgeon was asked to take on the role after Alliance decided not to be part of the executive. So some steps in the right direction, and a really kind of incredible show of how peace has really thrived since the Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland. Sinn Féin and the DUP will jointly lead the executive and are entitled to several other ministerial posts each, as they are the 2 largest parties. Alliance saw its number of MLAs almost double to 17 in 2022's assembly election, and has indicated it will be willing to take on the justice portfolio again and will most likely, under the Hunt mechanism, be eligible for a second ministry. The UUP Ulster Unionists are also expected to take on a ministerial position. The SDLP, which is the fifth largest party, has 8 MLAs and has said it will not be part of the next executive and will instead go into opposition. So this is the way the government will likely set out, but there still is a long list of things to do. One of them will be sorting public sector pay. A few weeks ago, more than 100,000 public sector workers in Northern Ireland staged a mass walkout, from nurses, teachers, transport workers, and civil servants. As they say, they have not, and they actually have not, because again, the government's not been functioning. They have not received a pay rise in the last couple of years. The new finance minister. So it's going to be interesting to see again, who gets these positions. Is it a kind of far right party like the DUP, or is it a kind of social democratic party, very effective social democratic party in Sinn Féin? It's going to be very, very clear. We'll see from there, how this stuff gets decided. But the next health minister will also face a plethora of problems, not least grappling with pay. Northern Ireland health and social care staff remain the lowest paid in the UK. So that is going to be a big thing to handle over the years. So waiting for a list of elective care has also been steadily worsening. The waiting list for elective care has also been steadily worsening in the last 10 years. Wonder why that is. That's probably not just things within the control of Northern Ireland. Let's be real there. All right. Now to our next story. I know I said, it was about 2 weeks ago, that David Cameron has been a very, very interesting politician for me to watch. And that is because he seems to be, surprisingly, especially for a Western, especially for a British politician, surprisingly pro-Palestinian. Someone who has kind of seen the light on a lot of important things, or not really seen the light, I guess, would be, I think the fairer phrase, the more accurate phrase would be, has said some kind of interesting slippage of comments here. The one we talked about the last time was when he talked about water being shut off in the Gaza Strip and saying, we would encourage them to turn back on that water. And then, he's saying, the person interviewing him said, you're admitting that water was turned off, and that happens to be, a war crime, turning it off to civilian populations. He was like, I just think it should be turned back on. I don't know. So you can tell he's not quite at liberty to really go fully out there. But this is also, another moment that was really had me like, okay. It's hard to see somebody, from the West, or hard to imagine somebody from the West, especially in the United States, speaking in terms like this. David Cameron said he will bring, as his position as Foreign Secretary, as part of an irreversible peace settlement. He would bring about really concerted efforts to recognize a Palestinian state. And they really kind of hinting that Britain could just go ahead and do it, in the kind of short order. In what would really mark a landmark diplomatic moment, he said the move would help bring about a two-state solution currently facing trenchant opposition from the Israeli Prime Minister. Benjamin Netanyahu has proudly said he does not want a Palestinian state. Palestinians must have a political horizon so that they can see there's going to be irreversible progress toward a two-state solution, which I think is a really good point. And if you listen even to what Hamas has said, they said, okay, well, they changed their charter in 2017 to recognize the possibility of a two-state solution, and there will be people with certain motives in this conversation that say, you really believe Hamas? Well, it's like, I would not believe, honestly. I think it's important to verify everything that both sides says, and there's no reason to think that Israel is inherently more trustworthy than Hamas, just especially based on some of their prior history and prior comments, just a blatant lying. So that is certainly to be very, very clear. But Hamas has said that they did the October 7th attacks, the October 7th terrorist attacks, because there was no horizon for the Palestinian cause. It was being pushed out, it was being marginalized, no one was supporting it. And even though they said in 2017 that they would accept a two-state solution, that didn't do anything for them. And now you can see they are being pushed. They felt like they were pushed towards having to really do something drastic to get the Palestinian narrative back on, kind of center stage, which they have clearly, succeeded in doing. And I think it is a very, very kind of astute analysis by and a self-interested analysis, but still a very astute analysis by Cameron here, because he is saying that, in order to have peace, people must have security on both sides of the conflict here. So Netanyahu has obviously rebuffed these efforts from allies, including the U.S., to win his support for a proposal for a two-state solution, saying it would endanger the state of Israel, as he criticized the attempt to, quote, coerce us into, just giving the Palestinians a state. But in his speech on Monday, Cameron spelled out how the UK and allies could add pressure by considering recognizing a Palestinian state at the United Nations. We should be starting to set out what a Palestinian state would look like, what it would comprise, and how it would work. And as that happens, we, with allies, will look at the issue of recognizing a Palestinian state, including at the United Nations. This could be one of the things that helps make this process irreversible. And it really is kind of rare, because he seems to be almost from a bygone era where politicians just have this new level now of just not giving a shit about any way of trying to bring about peace or foster peace. So, they're just saying, like, we support Netanyahu no matter what. Even some of the Democrats have been saying that, and only really just doing gestures at a two-state solution, when a lot of, pretty much everyone with any kind of sense is saying that a two-state solution is the only way you can bring about peace in the kind of the realistic sense, without, really harming the, fundamental structure of the Israeli government. You can get it. That's kind of another, conversation about how to really resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But, so many people say they want a two-state solution, especially kind of, liberals in the United States who are facing a lot of pressure on this stuff, say, of course we want a two-state solution, of course. But, and we see Keir Starmer kind of along the same lines here in the United Kingdom. Angie Rayner, just staring at that guy, who was just holding up pictures of his family, just begging for help from her. And after, meeting him during the 2019 election, but, we'll get, it's just a really, really crazy story. So UK Labour, full of frauds, although they're saying they want a two-state solution. Most of the Tories aren't better, but then you have David Cameron coming out there and saying, we believe a two-state solution is the right way to go, and we're actually going to take steps to bring that about, instead of just sitting on our hands and hoping that Israel does something. It's really the bare minimum in terms of, responsible kind of, Western power exercising, because, that he comes off as this aristocratic, Etonian or wherever the hell he went to school kind of figure. But, those type of people, they know how to manage an empire. And they know how to, do a lot of kind of injustice, but they also know how to, pacify the restive masses. And it really does make sense that actually doing a two-state solution, whatever that form may be, and taking steps to really recognize it, is the way towards peace, is the way towards, calming the situation down and getting back to business as usual, which is really what everyone in the West wants. And that is something that he has proven pretty effective at doing here with this suggestion. So that is a, very, very key point. And it is something that is quite encouraging and almost a little bit weird here, as you really just don't see this often. Cameron's going to make his fourth visit to the Middle East since being appointed foreign secretary, as he presses for a de-escalation of tensions. Starting in Oman, the senior conservative peer is expected to call for stability amid Houthi attacks in the Red Sea and an immediate pause in the conflict in Gaza, as he seeks to work diplomatically to stop the Israel-Hamas war from escalating into a wider conflict. As an attack by Iran-backed militias in Jordan over the weekend that killed 3 U.S. troops and left dozens injured have stoked fresh fears of a Western confrontation with Tehran. So, yeah, he seems to be the only one kind of actually serious about, being, exercising that traditional Western role of just saying, everybody, let's calm down. Let's get back to, running these ships through the Red Sea and all making money. Which is not to, and again, it's important to say that's not what we should be aiming for. That's not what we should be striving for in terms of creating a better world. But it is a little bit weird, and it, I'm not going to lie, is refreshing to see a politician who actually is capable of behaving in that way. So very interesting stuff there. And we will, obviously be continuing to watch this story. All right. To our last story today, the Labour MP Kate Osamor has been suspended and has issued an apology for calling Israel's attacks on Gaza a genocide in comments marking Holocaust Memorial Day. The BBC reports the MP for Edmonton in London had written, "Tomorrow is Holocaust Memorial Day, an international day to remember the 6 million Jews murdered during the Holocaust, the millions of other people murdered under Nazi persecution of other groups, and more recent genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, and now Gaza." Bum, 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 bum. That just sends, alarm bells in the, joint office that the leader of the opposition has with LFI. And I think is really just what happened. It was like, boom, boom, boom. Time to suspend the whip. You can imagine like a scene in the movie. In a movie, whenever there's a tweet with Gaza and genocide in the same tweet from anyone who is a Labour MP. So it is a very, very fair kind of thing to point out, I think, if you're just looking at it objectively, especially given that the ICJ has ruled that Israel stands plausibly accused of genocide. But it was just, completely not acceptable, and neither was her apology, apparently. Osamor wrote on X late the other day, "I apologize for any offense caused by my remembrance to the ongoing humanitarian disaster in Gaza as part of the period of remembrance." So she's had the whip taken away. A party source confirmed Labour's chief whip had issued a precautionary suspension of the whip pending investigation, leaving Osamor outside the parliamentary Labour Party and sitting as an independent MP. She joins a pretty sizable list of MPs sitting without the whip, including Diane Abbott, Nick Brown, Bombos Charlombus, Jeremy Corbyn, Durant Davies, Conor McGinn, Andy McDonald, and Christina Rees, and Claudia Webb. And the Jewish labor movement here, I think, was probably the major Jewish labor movement, Labor Defense of Israel, all those type of people, the kind of Stop Corbyn campaign that has gone on to really support Keir Starmer within the Labor Party has been pretty strong in terms of shutting this down. And I think it's a really fair point and pushing Starmer to suspend the whip. And I think it's a very, very fair point. If you think about it, what Kate Osamor is saying here, and the International Holocaust Remembrance Day is a day to remember and recognize the Holocaust and other genocides that have happened, since then. And there, I would think, is no better way to enhance and honor the spirit of the Holocaust and the spirit of Never Again and all that by raising your voice, especially as a member of Parliament, to stop what the ICJ says is plausibly a genocide playing out right now. So that is something that it should be well within the rights of anybody to speak up about and not be suspended from the party. And especially, by the way, after she apologized, the Jewish labor movement comes out with a statement, her non-apology rang hollow. How do you define non-apology? I think we know the answer. It's anybody who isn't, anyone who apologizes that it hasn't, bent the knee and sworn complete fealty to LFI and JLM. So I think that is a very, very clear boundary. For example, there was a Huddersfield MP, Labour Huddersfield MP, Barry Shearman, who tweeted a few years back that when two Jewish just two Jewish people missed out on a peerage, there was going to be a run on silver shekels, which is like, way more blatantly anti-Semitic. They're going to I try to flee to Israel or something. I don't even know. Just a really kind of anti-Semitic joke, really easily coming to him. And he got a lot of flack for it, but he apologized and he said, "I've been a longtime supporter of Israel, everybody, and I'm on the labor right." So he was fine. Kate Osamor, not necessarily in the SCG, I believe, but somebody who is not, made that oath, I guess, really gone to associated with themselves in the same way with the JLM and kind of LFI, and really proclaim themselves to be true friends of Israel. They haven't gone any kind of junkets yet to visit, Isaac Herzog, as happened over the weekend. So, when these people like Kate Osamor, when, Andy McDonald says that he wants Palestinians and Israelis to live in peaceful liberty from the river to the sea, that is unacceptable. That is unacceptable. And even if you apologize, like Kate Osamor, kind of stupidly did, because she really was honestly going to be suspended anyway, they still take the whip away from her. I think, that in itself, conduct-wise, is very, very clear. So Labor's National Executive Committee member Mish Rahman noted the double standards over Osamor's suspension, noting that the MPs, some MPs have not lost the whip or shadow front bench posted for controversial comments that they subsequently apologized for. Osamor, she was approached for comment by Labor List here, but it seems that she did not get back. Probably, smart to keep your mouth shut, if you want to be a Labor MP. And that's just how it is right now in Keir Starmer's Labor. I mean, unless you are, directly follow the party line, then your head is on the political chopping block. So, that's all the time we have for today. Try to keep it short. We'll be back next week, hopefully with the company of Myron Michaelides.